Hey guys, it's me, Oscar Wow, and this is my story. I grew up in a Dominican household in Paterson, New Jersey with my mother and older sister Lola. You would think that being surrounded by Latinos would be comfortable since I was one myself, but in reality it was just about everything but that. Many of the Dominicans I knew aspired to reach the ideal known as the Latin lover. This stereotype meant someone who was charming, confident, and had interests that actually reflected Dominican and not American culture. As reluctant as I am to admit it, I shared none of those qualities, making this ideal unattainable. I was severely overweight, and I never really thought of myself in high regards. To make matters worse, I loved fantasy and science fiction. Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, Marvel, you name it. This interest ended up isolating me from the majority, and once isolated, I used my passion as a remedy for my loneliness. It provided me with a sense of escape from the realities of my life, and I didn't see how my insecurities could be eased any other way. My fellow Latino peers didn't understand why my interests reflected that of a quote-unquote white person though, and unsurprisingly, I was bullied. A lot. In attempts to rid myself of such harassment, I found myself trapped in an identity crisis, in which I was torn between the American and Latino sides of me. Time and time again, I tried to find a balance but came up short each time. Part of me wished to stay true to my identity, yet the other part of me wanted to absorb my Dominican heritage. As if conditions in society weren't bad enough, the people around me judged my worth on the basis of my race. On one hand, my skin color made me, quote-unquote, too black to enjoy fiction, but at the same time, my interests were deemed, quote-unquote, too white to fit in within the Latino community. At the time, I was almost certain that the hardships I faced occurred thanks to Fuku. For those of you who don't know, Fuku is essentially a curse. My family, as well as almost every other Dominican family, never really believed in the idea of free will. Every incident that unfolded, it seemed like, stemmed from the supernatural force that carved our destiny from birth. The majority of tragedies that plagued my family found their roots in Fuku, and it's something that unfortunately will never subside. Fate was not in our hands, and after seeing that my seclusion became more and more apparent, I felt that my own fate wasn't in my hands either. Anyways, time passed, and I reached what I believe to be is the lowest and darkest point of my life. During my time studying at Rutgers, I fell into such a deep depression that I felt the need to end my life altogether. If it weren't for Junior, my best friend, I actually would have carried through with it. Fortunately for me though, he picked up the shattered pieces of my life and glued them together, but I needed something permanent to cement my happiness. Coming back to the Dominican Republic in search of this, I realized love was the only thing that could shed light on the darkness that was my life. For years, I desired it, but it wasn't until this point that it actually came within my grasp. Her name was Yvonne, and she was practically an embodiment of all my deepest desires. Yes, she was a prostitute, but she was the first girl that I genuinely loved. Because I lacked such an intimate connection throughout my childhood, I ended up chasing her to an extent that made me pay the ultimate price. A bullet was all it took. My hesitance to embrace conformity made me stray from society, but it was the same individualistic mindset that cut my happiness short of what appeared to be long-lasting. Looking back, I've realized that I ended up reverting to my own thoughts, my own opinions, and my own values as the basis for my decisions. Neglecting what others said about Yvonne felt good at the time, and while this did have its consequences, I still don't regret it even after death. I've always been aware of the fact that love and sacrifice go hand in hand, and I was willing to achieve happiness, even if it was just for a brief moment. I didn't live past my 20s, but during my time here on Earth, I evaluated who I truly was, faced the racial prejudice of society, dealt with moments where I felt that I couldn't even control my own fate, and even loved a girl so much that it cost me my life in the end. My name is Oscar Wow, and my life was indeed brief yet wondrous.